All right.
Bring it. Bring it.
Greetings. Greetings, human beings. Welcome. This is the third episode of Unlicensed Therapists, the podcast where we dissect the human experience in the 21st century and explore how we think, how we relate, and how we believe. Now, who would have thought that a Jewish author and a Muslim illustrator would take on the Christian icon Santa Claus? That is a Christian icon, right? And then write one of the most raucous, funny, and smart books of the year. And the authors of the book, The Rise of Super Santa, are here. It's Mookie Spitz and Rusty Unistov. Am I getting that right, Rusty? That's the way you say it?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. And the Spitz is the writer, and Rusty is the illustrator. And this is it's a big book. This is and apparently it's part of a trilogy. So it's 400 pages, and it's got almost 200 illustrations in it, Rusty?
Yeah, and including little vignettes here and there too. Yeah, it's nearly 200 illustrations just in the first book.
Yeah, and about 141,000 words of Super Santa.
Yeah. So this is the book. I have to admit I'm only about 3/4 of the way through, right? But it's just not what I expected. I started reading it. I was thinking like it's gonna be a kid's book, like Spitz knows. I started reading it to my daughter. She's 7.
Yeah, I was afraid.
Yeah, he was afraid. You were, but it's not. It's really like the way that you've the focus on a lot of it. And this is why we're on unlicensed therapists. A lot of it really is your insight into culture, into people, into relationships, into family dynamics. Like complicated, unconventional family dynamics. You've got the interracial, blended families, the way that people sort of get to each other. It's just a story of what the world is like right now in 2023. So, just how did this come about? And you guys have been like partners in this kind of thing for years now, right?
Yeah, we met in a marketing agency in Orange County, California back in 2007. And both of us, probably because of our ADHD, we can only sit still for about 20 minutes at a time. And what happened was we'd leave our desks sporadically throughout the day and run into each other in the company kitchen. And half the time I'd run into Rusty and he'd be dipping his tea bag in some hot water. And I'd be like, oh, this guy again. And we instantly hit it off. We started chatting about history. He's an emigre. I'm a first-generation American. And we just instantly had a great rapport. And one thing led to another. So I did a lot of creative writing. Rusty was an illustrator, an animator, a graphic artist. And we both thought it would be wonderful to just join forces and write stories. And that's how Super Santa essentially germinated.
So when did Super Santa germinate? I mean, was this something that just kind of came to life recently, or is it something that you guys had?
Oh, about 6 months into our friendship at the company, with him teabagging and me, doing my ADHD runs. Rusty came up to me with an idea. He goes, "Hey, Mookie, I've had this idea for a while. Get this. There's a Syrian refugee. It's a little girl, maybe 7, 8 years old. And she makes a wish to Santa Claus for her family to get together, for her to be safe. And Santa Claus doesn't listen to her. So she appeals to, in a sense, the League of Nations of Santa Clauses, the Santa Clauses throughout the world, the Mexican Santa Claus, the Jamaican Santa Claus, the English Santa Claus, will all gather together, join forces, and grant the little girl her wish." I think that's more or less how you put it to me, Rusty. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's about this little girl losing faith in Santa Claus, losing faith in humanity in general, and she was very upset, and all this ordeal that was I don't remember that was exactly what's going on, but the idea was just to gain back that confidence in sort of belief, this childish sort of belief into miracle and Santa Claus.
Yeah, so we called this idea Team Santa. And I thought it was a terrific idea because most folks just think about the American style Santa Claus being ubiquitous, right? This global Santa Claus. And when you look into Santa Claus, each country with their own culture and tradition has their associated Santa Claus. You've got Papa Noel, you've got Father Christmas, you've got the German Krampus, who is like the anti-Santa Claus, where you've got the good Santa Claus giving presents to the nice kids, and this monster punishing the naughty kids. So there's a whole mythology around Santa Claus, and it's got an international flavor to it. And I thought that was a terrific idea. I thought it was unique. I thought we could do a lot with it, but it was missing a few key elements. And the big element was, who's the bad guy and what's the dramatic tension? So we noodled around with this for a while, and we figured we could sit down and write a screenplay. We were near Hollywood anyway, and I'd written a few screenplays, and Rusty was into it. And as we sank our teeth into the idea, a light bulb went off maybe a couple weeks into the project of Santa Claus being a superhero. And that essentially evolved from this idea that the dynamic tension, remember Rusty was saying that this little girl lost faith in Santa Claus. And then I extrapolated that. The kids today don't care about Santa Claus. They're too distracted with their video games and toys and their superheroes. And basically, who cares about Santa Claus anymore anyway? He's just an old boomer. And that was the underlying tension that built up the core story. So a kid sees Santa Claus delivering a present beneath his tree. Santa Claus is surprised. The kid is alarmed. But then Santa Claus comes to the realization that the kid doesn't even care that he's been seen. The kid just wants his present. Santa Claus falls into a slump, gives up on Christmas, and then he's talked into becoming a superhero. Yell together and say, if you can't beat him, join him, Santa. And that becomes the driving tension to it.
Yeah, this is but there's a lot more to it though, right? I mean, that's
the core idea. The core idea is that the old school, the older generation is tired and boring. The young generation sees things differently, wants to cast the world in their own light. So that's one of the themes that operates with the book. The old having to give way to the new, and the new not quite knowing what they need or what they want to do. So that's the dramatic underpinning of it.
Right.
The next critical step was to infuse it with some emotion. When we originally wrote the screenplay, the family surrounding it, the boy, his sister, their mother and father, were really ancillary to the plot. It was mostly focused on Santa Claus, the elves, the actual superheroes who take advantage of the situation. And then when we decided to turn it into a full-length novel, it became more expansive. All of a sudden, we could do so much more with it, add dimensions, add scenes. And then when Rusty leaped in with his drawings, because the original screenplay obviously was just text, then it became very exciting because we realized that, to make the drama come to life, to really elevate it into literature, we had this opportunity to dive deeper into the relationships, and that's what we did.
Yeah. And so you said that there's a lot of, so Santa Claus is the boomer, right? He's old. This is an old school story. It's an old legend. Everybody's got they've got video games. Everything is, they're on their screens, everything is gamified, and it's just not, it doesn't have that. The Santa Claus story is kind of a little slow and a little outdated, right? So, I mean, there's a metaphor there. And you have a lot going on there. I mean, you have this sort of blended family where you have a black father and a daughter, and I think it starts off with a death in the family. The girls that's actually, you wrote that really, really well, Spitz. It was actually very moving because my daughter is also, she's 7 years old, so it's something. And I told you I was like reading the book to her, so she saw it, like it was just done very, very sensitively. But so there's those dynamics, and then he gets into this relationship, right, with this other woman who's divorced and her son, and and there's all kinds of different things happening. There's like, he's getting taken away. He's a black man getting taken away by the cops at some point. The neighbor points a gun at him. He's like getting Karen at a supermarket. He's playing with his stepson, and some old white woman thinks that he's beating up his kid.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, am I you've been talking about stuff that happens like 2/3 of the way. Yeah, but this does not spoil the story. Am I spoiling the story?
Yeah, no, it's great. And you're illustrating what Rusty and I tried to do, which is capture some of the zeitgeist of contemporary society in America. Lots of people are politically polarized, socially and culturally kind of a mess. With everyone trying to get their bearings. So that's exactly right. We created this hybrid family, exemplifying race issues, culture, identity issues, and also relationship issues. What is the modern family like, to bring that out? I also threw in little nuggets of like attraction theory too, which is Jack, who is the inner city African American from Washington, D.C., he's emotionally avoidant. And Diane, Jack and Diane, who were filler names at first, and we just rolled with it. And Diane is a mixed race woman from a higher bracket, if you will, of economic class and standing. And we drove them together, and she is emotionally anxious. So we created this kind of dynamic, which is very archetypal, very typical between lovers. And we threw them into this mix, which was loaded with real life situations, real life drama that we wanted to use to kind of anchor this fantastic story about the North Pole. Santa Claus, his elves, the machine of Christmas. And then we introduced all sorts of contemporary elements there too. Labor relations problems, managerial issues. And that juxtaposition between everyday reality with an eye for some humor and drama, with this fantastic mythological construct that we're all familiar with, we threw them all together in a way where they complemented each and reinforced each. And, and we hope brought out some kind of, truism about what we're doing.
As I recall, when we started working on the story, and later a little bit, both Mookie and I, we were going through a pretty rough patch, in our lives too. Yeah. So he had some stuff going on. I had some stuff going on. So in a way, it was therapeutic because we were sort of, at first I was a little bit hesitant about introducing so many characters, and Michael was very, very courageous with introducing more and more characters. And at first I was, is he just turning our story, like Sweet Christmas Story and superhero story, into something more personal? But then I realized it was so genuine and so powerful that I think, you know what, this first encounter, that when Santa Claus is seen by a boy, that's the first moment when the Santa actually, instead of panicking, and we actually turn it upside down. It's for the first time Santa Claus and Christmas, instead of being a background for some romantic Christmas story or a fairy tale, he actually touched the reality. He made contact with the real world, and we wanted to show this real world with all its ugliness, roughness, and all the crazy stuff going on with the interrelational stuff and marital, struggles, and addictions, and betrayal. So Santa, for the first time, he wanted to fix the problem. He wanted to understand what's going on with the real world, why kids are not interested. But then he realized kids actually involved with their families, and there's so much going on. And I think he couldn't handle it. And that's why he eventually gave up and just, messed up Christmas.
Yeah, there's I think you were saying spoiler alert when I was talking about some of the things that happen here. But what I don't want to spoil, I think the real spoiler alert would be how the characters respond to these situations, right? So and that's what I found interesting, because I think this is where I think what Rusty's saying about your personality, Mookie, is that, well, I know how it like I know you, so I guess I see how some of the characters actually respond, and it's interesting. You have this, and I'm not going to get too much into it, but you have this kind of taking things in stride. Seen it all, been there, done that, like that kind of recognition, which is really that is what a lot of society nowadays is like, right? I mean, everybody's desensitized to everything. Nothing is, anything you say loud, everything is so loud that nobody really hears anything. Everything's super amplified uniformly, so nothing really breaks through. So I do get that sense of, when everything is going on in the book. I think it's really interesting how you captured the way that people react to things, which just isn't the way that they used to before.
Yeah, everything is.
I don't know if that was something that you thought of consciously, or whether it just kind of came across that way.
Well, both. To Rusty's point, a lot of personal things came out, but the essential theme of the book is that Santa Claus, this very traditional symbol of the spirit of Christmas, sacrifice, giving, charity, family, love, has been supered up out of necessity. And that's really an analog and a projection of to your exact point, our whole society being supered up. Everything is a supermarket. Everything is bigger than life. And like Umberto Eco wrote years ago, it's a sense of hyper history here in America. There's no context. People aren't learning civics anymore. Our educational system is breaking down. The politics is further polarizing us, red and blue and rich and poor. And this sense of fragmentation and divide is churning. And our reaction to that is just to jack it all up, turn it to 11. We're wired on our phones. We're interacting constantly and yet communicating nothing. And that sense is there. And Santa, just to Rusty's point, internalizes this as well. Santa's reaction to being rejected by this child as this antiquated old boomer is to take on the worst characteristics of the society that he's ostensibly there to infuse with the spirit of Christmas. He becomes Super Santa. Super Santa is absurd. It's ridiculous. And that over-the-top feeling is pervasive throughout the book. And we had a lot of fun with it. So it's dramatic, it's emotional, but we wanted it to be funny. The elves are doing drag shows.
Yeah.
There's a strike that happens at the North Pole. There's a bunch of these very humorous, parodic elements that take place. So we wanted it to be thrilling and fun and entertaining, and at the same time reflective of America in 2023 at its worst, but also at its best.
Yeah. Rusty, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to what Mookie said about that there are plenty of stories when characters from the North Pole would, be ridiculed in the real world, and many, comedic situation would be, derived from this situation. But we decided to go into the opposite direction with having them, when these two worlds collided, we wanted the characters not just be ridiculed by each other or just, elves, surprised by the real world. And the real people are just, making fun of this clumsy Santa Claus. No, we want them to interact as it would be two cultures, collide. They fall in love, they try new things, they fail. And another thing that I wanted to mention, that for both of us, for Mookie and I, we had pretty solid kind of careers in communication world, but we always wanted to do creative stuff. The same way when we made this excursion into this creative world, we instantly realized it confronts this kind of corporate routine. You can't really handle it. So the same way Santa Claus, when he tries to get out of this routine, his routine, and try something else or try something new, it's also very stressful and crazy. It comes with some, crises and some, crazy situation, losing faith in their, loyal elves and
Yeah.
arguing with them and fighting. So that was almost every episode of the book has some connection to our real experience. And
Yeah.
that's what we loved about this book. We wanted it to be partially our personal stories, and I think we succeeded in that. I think it shows at some point.
Well, it does, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because the thing is, I that's what I was going to ask you, is that so you're Mookie just said that you're a first generation immigrant, and you came here. You're an enormously talented artist. I mean, the pictures are just
show some, Rusty. Give up a few.
Yeah. Go for it. Use the screen share. Yeah. Oh.
Well,
that's when the buttons fly off. That's when he's
this is when Emily encourages her with her dad to go out there and start dating
again.
But he kind of let himself go a little bit. So when he tried his new fancy jacket, the buttons couldn't handle it. So, and Emily was the first to almost she got hurt by this exploding jackets. And that's her literally pushing her dad to date again out of the door. Just for our audience to see, the style of this, of the illustrations, and that elves helping Santa to do some makeover for his new modern, as they thought,
1.0, right?
More hip look.
1.0.
Yeah, I did my best to make the prose as cinematic as I could.
It's very visual.
Who know me from other mediums too. Like I do blog posts, I do short stories, other screenplays. I like it fast, and it's very action oriented. And Rusty and I really worked seamlessly together, because it started as a screenplay. Rusty leaped in, bringing it really to life, almost like a storyboard. And he infused each of these vignettes with just action that pops. Everything is crawling, not only with emotion and dramatic tension, but things are happening, and the illustrations are popping, and the prose is popping too. And
it's very dynamic. Like it's all like that when you go through it. And this is, I'm just kind of building on what you're saying, and I noticed that off the bat, is that the way that you write, the dialogue that you have, is just people, the back and forth. I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to say Sorkin-esque, because I think you might. I don't know what you think about Sorkin, but it's completely different from that. But the feel, right? The feel of it, that super fast, dynamic, quick-witted action it's just very, very palpable when you read it. So and that makes it more riveting. That's what makes it a page turner.
Thanks. And it's lengthy. It's like 471 pages, but we also made a few great decisions. One was, in the original drafts, I had really long chapters. Mm-hmm. And even though we had an illustration almost on every other page, it was dense. And then when we did a revision, we came to the realization that short, tight, energetic chapters would be more effective. So the book is divided into 3 stockings or parts, of which there are 20 gifts within each. Mm-hmm. So we've got 60 gifts or 60 chapters across 471 pages. So each chapter or gift is literally anywhere from 3 to 8 pages, with anywhere from 2 to 4 or even 5 illustrations. So it's a quick read, but it's a dense read, and it's a fun read. And we try to draw that balance between a novel, a comic book, and a graphic novel. So it's kind of its own thing. And we're really happy about that. And we also chose the big 8.5 by 11 format. And the illustrations sometimes are embedded within the text, which creates that illusion of this hybrid between a comic book and a novel. Some of the illustrations are just kind of floating there. The text is wrapped.
It adds to the dynamism, actually.
Yeah.
It adds
to the kind of raw and fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So I and Rusty, I just wanted to go back to, so you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how this talent developed, how you got into it, and just what your story is?
Well, I mean, I was born and raised pretty much in Soviet Union, and I think we used to live in a very rural village in one of the Russian colonies. Let's put it this way, and I um, I went to so my parents were very busy, and they left me with some like elderly woman that had like 10 or 12 children in her house, and she said, well, just leave your son here. I'm not gonna even see the difference really, so I can watch him. So, and one of her sons, I guess, or sons actually, he was you know, he used to, he was like, he was an artist. He would draw a lot, paint. And as a little boy, I think I was like 4 years old, I was watching him doing that, and I was very, I was mesmerized. I was really, really loved it because it was so different from this rural life, and it was unbelievable. So then when I was, in middle school, I guess my dad, took me to an art school, and I was, I couldn't stop drawing, but I was, I think when I was in fourth grade, a friend of mine, whose father actually served in Libya to help Libyans to build anti-aircraft system against the United States, attacks.
Oh, that's nice.
But people who served or worked, Soviet, citizens who used to work in foreign countries, they were paid in foreign currency, so they can buy some cool stuff there and bring to the Soviet Union, which was isolated. We couldn't see any comic books, nothing really, like VHS tapes, movies, nothing. So, but his father brought a lot of comic books and movies, and I would hang out with this guy, and I was just amazed to see like Star Wars for the first time. Then I saw French. I think there was French comics, French Pif Gazette, magazine. That was amazing. It blew my mind. And then I realized the Soviet government was hiding from me a lot of things. And I think from the fifth grade, I became a dissident because I hated the fact that how could you just not let me know? But there's so much stuff was going on. How could you hide from me Spider-Man, for instance, or Star Wars? You are evil because you wouldn't allow me to see any of this. So I hated them forever, and I never really forgave them for that. So, and then I went to films. When I was 16, we used to have this very popular national magazine, the Crocodile called. It was a Soviet kind of propaganda cartoon magazine, and but they would allow sometimes just some random humorous, cartoons, and they would even reprint some of the foreign, from foreign, magazines, some cartoons. So, and I got published when I was 16. It was I repurposed. There was like a Russian old fairy tale about some old man saving, bunnies during a flood. There was a story. So I used this bunnies kind of hijacking that little boat and asking me to take them to Sweden. So, and I think it was, they printed this cartoon, the kind of political cartoon, and then I printed a few more, and that was just the most inspiring thing in my life. I still remember. I was I was very, very inspired by that, and it was, it was great. It was one of my, greatest memories in my life. And then I went to film school, studied animation, and after that, I worked in a few studios. Then at some point, I bought a house in Ukraine, in Crimean Peninsula. I wanted to move there because I used to live there when I was little. And then in 2005, I think I started working with this American company in California. And then we agreed, like, if they liked what I do for 2 years, if I work for them, they would give me like a work visa, so I can go and work and live there. And I always wanted to move to the United States or to any country, really, just to leave Russia.
Yeah.
So, and then, to my, surprise, they actually invited me over, and I moved with my family and my 2-year-old son and my wife. And it was stressful, but at first, but then I made really great friends, including Mookie, who became not just a friend, but my, creative partner, and I probably have the most fun when I meet with him, when we hang out and think about our stories, writing, and just goof around. He's a great guy. So that's how we met, and this is my story.
I loved Rusty's perspective. My parents were Hungarian emigres post World War II by way of Venezuela. So I learned English from watching TV. That's how come I speak so good to this day. So there's a sense of being a stranger in a strange land that we both held. And Rusty had just emigrated. I think you were here only for about a year, maybe even less than a year when we met.
Yeah.
And we had that connection of looking at America through these eyes of wonder, but also a little bit of confusion. And I think Rusty was trying to figure it out. I think I'm still trying to figure it out. And Super Santa is our collective effort here to try to make sense of this awesome experiment, which is in ways such a mess, and in other ways holds such tremendous promise for really the world. It's a great experiment. And Super Santa, in a sense, is our homage as emigres, as the sons of emigres, to this great country. Everything that's great and awful about it, exemplified through some of its mythology, some of its legends. And that was really our intent.
Yeah, and the more disillusioned we become, the more we love this country, actually, with all this chaos and craziness. But I have this very, specific frame of reference grown up in the other part of the world, that this is the best place. I don't want to be anywhere else.
We love the country, and I think that comes out in Super Santa too, which is we satirize so many elements of American society. As you mentioned, Jack, who's black, shows up at his own house, and he's welcomed by his new neighbor, who's literally holding an automatic weapon at him.
Yeah.
So that exemplifies really how we dialed everything up to 11. Everything that's annoying and shitty about living in the States right now, we bubbled up to the surface. And at the same time, we brought down all the annex of the North Pole so that the two came together. And the third leg of that stool, if you will, is the superheroes. So we created our own superhero franchise with the unique quality that the boundary between them as real people and their super selves had dissolved.
Astonishing.
Had dissolved. So we have Mr. Astonishing and Nano Gal. And they're not just actors. It's not Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man, but Mr. Astonishing is Mr. Astonishing, both in his personal life and on screen and in the video games. And in a sense, you've got the family drama. You've got Santa and the elves in the North Pole. And between them, you have these real superheroes, which locks it together and drives the whole story. And as Rusty mentioned, part of our frustration with our day jobs, working in corporate America, living that grind, we brought to bear with some of the evil corporate shenanigans of this superhero franchise. And that drove the plot too, which is who takes advantage of Super Santa's mayhem, and who takes advantage of Christmas being ruined? None other than the forces of the stock market and evil capitalism. So that it is.
It's kind of really interesting how you tie in all these things together. And sometimes, like, I don't really know how you're going to tie it in, but you do. So it's that's a lot of fun. But I think that the glue that really holds everything together is just your insight, and both of you. I mean, just your insight into human relationships. And I guess it is like we've got like two Muslim guys and a Jewish guy here sitting talking about Christmas and Santa Claus. So this is already kind of interesting. And you had the experience that you had. Spitz, like learning how you learned English, and then Rusty, you coming over here. I have a similar experience, and the family that you see is pretty much as as much of a North American type of family as it can be, where you have different elements coming from different places, different emotional stories. You know, a girl who's lost her mother. You know, a man who's you know, the avoidant attachment. You've got all of that happening. You know, a woman who was on the dating scene and just met this clunky guy that she couldn't get along with, and then so everybody comes together in a blended family, and there's all kinds of, it's like there's no nothing's really sugar coated. You know, everything you read is it's very real. It's all very recognizable. So
yeah, and it was to our own surprise too, because we created so many characters from such different backgrounds. And at first we were, you know, how are we going to manage this whole, you know, chaos? But then we realized that there's so much intertwined between each other, you know, with there's love, there's hate. And we just realized if the story is solid and the characters have their own very strong motivation, it's easy to blend them into this one big, just a knot of like events and you know, things. And it was just now when I look back at our story, it was amazing. There were some characters that came up just maybe 5 minutes before we finished, and we came up with a character, and then we go back and rewrite this entire story with this character being a crucial part of the story. That's what happens sometimes, because some of the characters are so great that you realize, oh my God, he's missing in the first chapter. Remember first chapter, or remember the 10, you know, chapter number 10, and there was this going on. He should be the one who did this. So I would go back and rewrite it, and it will. And I really, really like what we did, and I think this courage that Michael had introducing new characters to the story. At first, I was, you know, I was very conservative because I treasured so much our setting and our, you know, North Pole superheroes, this family. Everything was tasteful. Everything was good. But then Michael's like, you know what? Let them roam loose. Let them just do crazy stuff. And then I realized it is the story. It is what happens, actually. That's the beauty of it. They all live in one world, and they cannot survive without each other in many ways, the way they interact.
It is. It's very real, and I think it's just written very sensitively and very intelligently. I think.
Thank you. And we got carried away. So the first book, as I mentioned, is 470 pages, 140,000 words, and 200 illustrations. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, because the expansive story is over 1,000 pages with 3 times as many illustrations, and we were under pressure. Rusty's lovely wife, Anastasia, she was like, finish the book.
Yeah.
She was pounding both of us. Months were going by. I was posting on Facebook, it's almost done, folks. Next month we're launching. And the goalposts kept moving.
That's classic, right? That's classic.
I built tension, and we put pressure on ourselves, but the story kept growing, and it was huge, and it just published the book. So then we came to the realization, who's gonna buy a 1,200-page illustrated novel about Santa Claus? Enough of a challenge selling the 470. That's when we decided to break it into a trilogy, which should have been patently obvious from the second we transcribed that original screenplay, because there's so much content, there's so many characters. And then when we did that, we really buckled down, exactly like Rusty mentioned. We zeroed in on that first Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, which is the rise of Super Santa, and then we sank our teeth into it, and then the story became dimensional and deep. It is what you have right now, and we're in the throes of writing books 2 and 3, which will come out early next year and mid next year, box set for 2024, and we can put a bow on it. But it's been a labor of love, and it's really kind of let the wildcat out of the gate. We're working on a science fiction novel. We've got like half a dozen other projects, and the synergy between the two of us is great. I live in New York. Rusty lives in LA. We had a dynamic Google Doc that was shared. I would be typing, Rusty would be adding comments. I would highlight an area and make a suggestion. I think, an illustration would be cool here. He'd start with it, whatever he felt like. And then when the illustrations came in, I embedded them. The story started to grow. And a lot of folks has observed, like Bill Field, who's a wonderful supporter. He's got the Field of Comics group for Facebook, and he's a comic book historian. Mm-hmm. And he sensed the synergy between us. He said, you can tell when you read this thing that you and Rusty have an excellent relationship, a very symbiotic, creative relation. And he's right. It's like it's a real joy to work with someone, and it's a real blessing to find somebody that you have that common vision. We have tons of arguments, tons of disagreements, but in that churn of not agreeing, amazing creative ideas pop out that are greater than the sum of the arguments, if you will.
Yeah, and that's actually that's the exact kind of creative partnership that you want. Because there's another thing, aside from what you said about, was it Bill Field?
Bill Field.
His observation. Yeah, when I read, I can tell how much fun this was. Right. So I know that you can sense it. You can sense both of you guys really doing this. I mean, you're doing this for the first time. These are not characters that are out there. You're inventing them. So it's not like you're working on the franchise. You have any other motivation, or you're getting like paid millions and millions of dollars, at least yet, right? While you were writing it to do it. So you're just purely doing it because you're loving every second of what you're doing. And that's what comes across. So, that's why I wanted to ask you about the process, because you're talking about, like, 471 pages, and eventually it's gonna be 1,200 pages and so on, and you've got like 200 a total of 400 illustrations, eventually the whole thing. And you did this really fast. Like, you talked about it, and I think it was within a year, less than a year, that you wrote this whole thing.
Yeah, about when the Santa sleighs hit the slopes was about a year and a few months, I think, when we really hit critical mass. And we were trying to get it out even for the Christmas of 2022, and we blew that deadline. And then we're like, let's get it out the next year. But then it really started. It's a snowball turned into a boulder rolling down the hill, and just the sheer momentum of our great creative relationship and our own ideas. And to your point, the fun we had. I mean, it was hard work. Don't get us wrong. It's like Jack White of the White Stripes. He says, ease of use is the scourge of every creative artist. You don't want it to be too easy. We use zero ChatGPT. Rusty,
no AI,
zero AI tools, and that was deliberate. It's like, we're doing this old school. We're doing this like traditional Santa. We're two North Pole elves, with the steampunk machinery. I got my keyboard, and that was part of it. It was like blood, sweat, tears, but tons of laughter and joy to just bang this out. And you get out what you put in. Now, that's one of the problems with society that we highlight in the book too, which is we want everything to be immediate and easy. And that's one of the themes we explore. Santa Claus wants things to be immediate and easy. That's why he soups himself up. He ruins Christmas, because the very spirit of the thing is sacrifice. You got to give to get. And in that sense, writing this thing and illustrating this thing was our way of giving. And what we want to get back is the opportunity to write more of these things. We want nothing more than the chance to just go help and keep cranking out books.
Yeah, when the means are the end. I mean, you've got the opportunity is just going to be the amount of fun that you had anyway, and anything else on top of that is just sort of icing on the cake. But so you're just, and one more. This is the last thing. There's two more things I want to talk about. Okay, what the second to last thing is, I just wanted to know about your process of. So you told me a little bit about how both of you work together, right? Where you're working in this like shared doc, and you're illustrating, you're writing at the same time. But when you write the book, did you all the stockings and the gifts the chapters and the parts, did you have them all planned out? Did you have an outline, or did you just kind of go with it?
Yeah,
and see where you had a loose structure of the story, and then just start writing and just go with it? Like, what is your style?
Mookie, you gotta tell the story about In and Out and the documents that we've created.
Yeah. So toward the latter end, to Rusty's point, we had an enormous 11 by 17 piece of paper with all the characters along the y-axis, and then key touch points in the story along the x. And we created this enormous grid of their motivation and action at this point. And then we created, again, an In-N-Out burger in Lake Forest, California. Yeah. We had another huge 11.5 by 17, which was literally a storyboarding of every single scene in the book, so that we ensured we had the right continuity. But that came almost after the fact. To cite an example, James Ellroy, who is one of my favorite writers, he deems himself the Tolstoy of American crime fiction, and he's right. He spends sometimes a year and a half just outlining his books before he actually writes out any of the scenes, because he feels that that's the core. Rusty and I were lucky in the sense that, remember, back in 2008, we wrote a screenplay called Super Santa, which we tried to peddle around Hollywood at the time. So we had the story outline, because a screenplay essentially is an outline. You've just got action, you've got dialogue, but it's the raw skeletal foundation of a narrative. So I took that screenplay and I spent about a month transposing it into long form prose. That was step one. So that became the essence of Super Santa. And then we could let it out, because we were no longer limited to the 30, 60, 90 format of the Hollywood screenplay, right? Introduce the character, build them up, reach the pinnacle of their fight for whatever they want, and then destroy them at page 60. And then in the last third, reconstitute them and make them victorious. That's like the archetype of the Hollywood movie. Yeah. And we followed that. But once we had a book, we could go wild, and that's when it really started to grow. So screenplay to prose format, and then that's when the momentum really built up. And then we started to add characters, round out the dimension like Rusty mentioned, and then we spent a lot of time just bringing out these themes and bringing it to life.
Yeah, I agree with the creating the outline, and the way that you did it actually reminds me of how Robert Galbraith, or who's actually J.K. Rowling, when she writes her crime fiction. I don't know if you're familiar with the Cormoran Strikes series. So she's a really good. I think more so than the Harry Potter stuff. Like her mind is just fantastic when it comes to writing these 600, 900 page just crime mysteries that are super with super intricate plots, and just it's fantastic. And so she occasionally has thrown up pictures of her whiteboards where she does y-axis. You got the characters, subplots, what everybody's going through. Yeah, it's awesome. Right. I'm kind of doing that with my book too, and it is anytime someone asks me about it, how's the book going? I'm like, I'm still plotting it.
Yeah, we've got a scene in book 2 where the elf meets the agent, and they're in an office, and there's all these schematics, so it's a little bit self-referential, fourth wall kind of stuff. But the one thing to keep in mind, though, is you can't just stick to the outline. Once you've got the outline and it starts evolving, there's a feedback loop between the essential core of the through line and all the things that you're adding. So it builds,
you're gonna go back and forth,
positive feedback, and then it evolves, and it becomes almost like an emergent phenomena, where it becomes, takes on literally a life of its own, where the characters demand time.
Right.
Well, there's entirely new characters that evolve just out of the process.
I'm in this scene, buddy. I'm in this scene. And this comes to mind. Before I forget, I want to bring up this nugget. And one of my best and fondest memory of working with Rusty on this was I would write a scene, and then I would highlight in the Google Doc, hey Rusty, would you think about do an illustration at this point? What do you think? He'd do an illustration and he wouldn't even read the shit that I wrote. He would just scan it. And he wasn't quite sure where in the story it happened. So there were numerous instances where the illustration is dead fucking wrong. It's like there was one scene, and this is a scene in book 2, where soon as Santa is with the superheroes and he's buffing up at an LA gym. And literally the superheroes are spotting Santa to help him, build up some muscle and some tone because now he's Super Santa. And in that scene, we had Mr. Astonishing, Nano Gal, and Super Santa. So Rusty, out of nowhere, puts the elf in it, who's another major character. And now, throughout the continuum of the narrative, the elf is like outraged that Super Santa is doing all this shit. It's like, what's going on? You're not delivering presents. Christmas is ruined. But the elf was not in this entire chapter. Well, guess what? Rusty put him in there because he thought it'd be really funny that as the weights are going up, the elf is grabbing on to Santa's feet to pull him back down. Yeah. And at first I'm like, what the fuck? I'm sitting here killing myself writing this stuff, and Rusty doesn't even read the shit that I write. And then the light bulb went off. Rusty's got a better vision for the scene is better with the elf in it. So I literally rewrote 20, 30 pages of Super Santa in Hollywood with the elf continuously trying to short circuit his indoctrination and training as a superhero, and it was never there before. And it was kind of a fortuitous accident. And that's one of my favorite. That's the surprise. Like in the movie Pulp Fiction, the Bruce Willis character Butch is driving and he just happens to run into the gangster Marcellus Wallace, who's scouring the earth looking for him. And it's that surprise, it's that spontaneity, it's that pop that makes it so organic. And this goes back to the mistakes a lot of writers and creators make, where you just stick to the outline. It becomes a mechanical process, right? Like a Hallmark movie, which is cookie cutter. Great writing, great literature, great art has a random element, which again is just like life. It's chaotic, it's quantum, it's uncertain.
Right.
And there's elements throughout Super Santa where it's like, the elf hooks up with the superhero, right? They go on a date, just to do a spoiler alert. And then Rusty do a drawing too, and it's like, wait a second, they're actually hooking up. I didn't take it that far in the scene. And Rusty dialed it all the way up to 11 with just an offhand idea, and it was transformative. And that kind of give and take happened throughout the narrative. And it got to the point where I was like, Rusty, don't even read it, just draw something. because the output was fresh. It was like, that's the beauty of working with somebody, because if you're a writer, so many writers work on their own, right? And you're all in your head. And it's glorious to have somebody pushing back, punching you in the face, surprising you, and forcing you out of your box. And that's where the best ideas come from.
Yeah, every scene in the book is a product of our little fights, not fights in a way that we would resist each other, but fights just convincing each other of a better ideas and surrender sometimes to your partner's ideas. It's like, no, I categorically against this. Right. And Michael, in 90% of sometimes I would propose something and Michael would say no. Then I hung up on him and I wait 1 minute. 1 minute. Yes. It's usually 1 minute, sometimes 2 minutes. Then he calls me and it's like, you were right. And I wait like a good wine, wine. It's just
that's exactly right. It happens so many times. But Rusty's like, I have the perfect scene. This is another mistake writers make. You sweat it out. You spent 8 hours on a fucking page, and that's your creation, and no one is gonna mess with it. And then Rusty would read it in 10 seconds and say, well, have you thought of that? And I was like, fuck no. I just spent 8 hours on this, and you're telling me offhand that I should change it up. And then, to Rusty's point, slam the phone, tune him out. And then I'm sitting there like, that's a great idea. I never would have thought of that. And in order to do that, partners need to have a shared vision. So Rusty and I were killing each other throughout writing the book with these little pokes and calls and arguments, which brought out the best in each of us. But what we have going on, which is what glues it all together and is the engine of the creativity, is the common shared vision. There wasn't a nanosecond when Rusty and I argued with each other about the vision of what the damn book is, the world that it takes place in. We both, from the beginning, saw the same reality and the same language. Within that reality, we were constantly back and forth. But with that shared vision was continuous, ubiquitous, and shared, and that made it solid throughout the whole thing. And that's why it was such a joy to work with Rusty, because we didn't argue about fundamentals, we argued about the minutia. And through arguing about the minutia, we elevated every scene to something that was way greater than the sum of both of us together.
Yeah. And I think what you said before about not sticking to the outline, actually, we let our creativity to, roam freely. And then to the point that we created such a massive amount of content that Michael had to literally come down to California, go to In-N-Out and say, let's create an outline. Otherwise, we'll lose our minds because there's so much
so the outline happened afterwards.
It was opposite.
No, we had the outline,
we had screenplay.
Right.
But then it grew out of it, and then we had to go back and bring something like some system to it because we were losing our minds because the story was started to live its own, on its own terms.
It wasn't off the rails. It just got too damn big, and we had to rein it in. And when we chopped it into thirds, we had the rise of Super Santa. We're like, all right, let's laser focus. And when we went back to the first third of the narrative, that's when holes started popping up. Remember, Rusty? We were like, wait a second, we left that. We got to go back. And then that was one of the most glorious parts creatively of this, which was finalizing the first book.
Yeah, our favorite, the most exciting moments of our project is the writer's blocks, right? When we had a roadblock and we don't know what to do. That's the most exciting part because I know 100% in 5, 10, 15 minutes we'll come up with a great solution that would take our story to the next level.
I call him, I go, Rusty, this scene, it sucks, right? We've reached the dead end. I know that the characters need to be here and I know that they need to be doing what they're doing, but brick wall, this blows. It lacks payback. It lacks that intensity that I like. The pace is slowed down. What the actual fuck? And then we go back and forth, and between the two of us, out pops this whole new idea, which bridges the gap between the struggle that the characters are experiencing, that impasse, and then the solution that gets them out of it. And here's what the greatest part is. Our struggle, Rusty and my, this sucks, we got to work this out, is infused into the prose and into the art because we worked it through. And that's what, Jack White was referring to earlier, that sense of ease of use. If it's easy, there's no tension. And if there's no tension, there's no drama. And if there's no drama, then it sucks. It's an exercise in just
you can sense it. You can sense it here with the way you guys are talking. I know that we could probably talk about this for
well, this is a fun tangent. I think our conversation really got jacked because we went from formality and exposition to
you get people starting to talk about their book. It's something else. So it's good, but I think that this is the kind of thing that people once more and more people read it and more people get into it and it develops a little bit of it. This is the kind of thing that it feels like the kind of books and stories that get cult followings. That seems like one of those things where if it does develop a sort of a subculture around it, it'd be great. But anyway, guys. that's it. We're gonna wrap it up there.
All right. Well, we can pitch like calls to action, folks. Super Santa is on Amazon. We've also got it on Barnes and Noble. We have our whoissupersanta.com where you could actually buy swag. So you've got some characters that are actually in books 2 and 3 that are already out there, like Rasta Santa. And then we've got Super Santa mugs. We've got Super Santa hats. We've got all the swag that's there if you want to purchase that without even bothering to buy the book.
This is the kind of thing
his art too, which is the individual one. So we probably should do NFTs, but there'll be a time.
Yeah, I don't even know that's a thing. But I'll tell you, it's like all the kids out there wearing like Led Zeppelin and Nirvana shirts, not even knowing what they are. They think they're like a clothing brand. It's like sort of. I mean, this art, the stuff just looks. It just looks so cool. The illustrations themselves look so cool that I think that is. Half of what'll probably be this.
And it was wonderful to see Rusty's. I call it the Super Santa style. Yeah, and it's even more evident because we're working on a science fiction book that has a completely different style. So iteratively, we went back and forth, and Rusty's style evolved into this whimsical, traditional, and familiar kind of caricature art, but at the same time with that sense of sarcasm and heaviness. It's a great juxtaposition between some of the irony of what we're trying to convey, right? Some of the struggle and paradox of the American situation, and at the same time the homage to the traditional, right? Because there's centuries of Christmas art. So Rusty did, I think, a tremendous job of blending what you'd consider very formal Christmas kind of drawings of Santa Claus with this crazy Super Santa shit.
And the same style, the same thing goes to Michael's writing style. It's a very sophisticated language with some street talk and then simple, sometimes vernacular language. I think that's the similar idea of combining academic drawing style, scratching and shadows and all that, and the grotesque line, art line, line work. So the same goes to Michael's writing style. I think it's a similar in a way.
No, it's a very moving story. The kind of emotion that comes out of the prose and the dialogue completely fits with the illustrations, and then you can tell that there was a lot of sort of synchronicity there in the way that you guys were working. So, but that's it. Like So the rise of Super Santa was like the first three out there.
Mookie, show your copy too. Mookie, do you have a copy?
We got a sandwich between them. We've got this is on it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble.
For the holiday.
It's really it's a great Christmas gift. It's fantastic. I'll be getting a couple of copies for people
just $20
that I know for Christmas. Yeah, so I think it'll be awesome. So and I do hope you guys I hope that this does it feels very visual. It feels like the kind of thing that could become a proper film, whether it's animated or whether it's like real. I guess we're jumping ahead there, but we'll talk about that when it happens. But thank you guys, man. This is really awesome.
You heard it here.
Special thank you to you.
Unlicensed
special
therapist.
Thank you to you, because it's easy to talk about something that is had a success already, or tons of people already purchased the book, but we very much appreciate people who actually read, liked the book, and gave us a platform to talk about it, share our excitement for this story. And we very much appreciate your interest, and that you actually are not afraid to say that you like the book, because people are usually very hesitant when they read something new, because they are afraid to be judged by the others. But you read it, you liked it, and we endlessly grateful for your time and that you believe in us.
Yeah, thank you. And I gotta say, I am a little bit biased, because I think that I got into it. Rusty, I didn't know your stuff before, but I got into it because I love Mookie's writing style, but then that introduced me to all of your stuff too now. So now pretty much anything you guys do, I have the thing, like if I like a a style or the kind of voice that somebody has, whether it's a voice of their art or their writing. It just I generally really become very interested in everything that they do. I have to see
Thank
what
you.
they offer.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, yeah.
but anyway,
Yeah, stay tuned.
we're
We got other stuff coming, and thanks
Yeah.
again, Ali, for hosting us.
yeah, thank you. Christmas Mubarak, everybody. That's what I was gonna say.
Kwanzaa and shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Happy Hanukkah to everyone.
Yeah.
happy Hanukkah, Christmas
It's the
Mubarak,
last
whatever
day
it
of
is.
Hanukkah today, right?
Yeah,
I think so. That's
Last
it.
day.
Yeah, with Super Santa.
Yeah. So that's what we're gonna celebrate it with. Merry Christmas, everyone. Get the book, read it. Read it. I actually do think you can read it to your kids and skip certain parts.
It's
Maybe
not too bad. And leave
yeah,
a review.
you're gonna love the pictures. They're gonna love the pictures. The pictures
Yeah,
are great.
leave
The
a
buttons
review.
flying out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be fun. But anyway, we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you guys very much. Everyone, go out there and get Super Santa. If you're actually watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you get notifications. Anything that you do here to when you do that, these kinds of videos and everything that we do here go in front of more people. So I really, really appreciate that. This is right now a new podcast, so
Right on.
it's gonna be fun. Anyway, all right, guys, take care.
Thank you.